Welcome back to the Ignite podcast, where we sit down with leaders, innovators, and operators who are shaping the future of business through bold thinking, authentic leadership, and real-world experience. Today's guest is someone who truly understands that behind every business strategy, growth plan, acquisition, or transformation are people. Joining us today is Bridget Gotz, a strategic HR executive, leadership advisor, and founder of BRGO Talent, with more than 25 years of experience helping organizations navigate growth, change, culture, and talent strategy across industries including healthcare, technology, financial services, and professional services. But Bridget is far from what most people picture when they think of traditional HR. In today's episode, we're diving into the realities of leadership of talent strategy and what companies still get wrong about people, how culture actually impacts performance, and the hidden human dynamics behind M&A and scaling businesses, and why trust and authenticity matter more than ever in today's workplace. Hey Bridget, welcome to the Ignite podcast. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you for the very warm welcome and wonderful intro.
So I love your experience and know that you've sat at many corporate tables with a lot of executives, and icebreakers may be something that you're very familiar with. So I want to swap and turn this around on you. We usually start the Ignite podcast with a fun icebreaker. What is your favorite icebreaker that you have executives do at those corporate tables?
So this is one that admittedly I stole, right? So is an imitation the best form of flattery? So I stole this once, but I've never let it go. It's one of my absolute favorite. It works better when you're in a physical location and space works to your advantage. So you can really make the most of space, but you can do it virtually. And so we could try it. So basically it's called This versus That. I don't know if you've played it or not, but what you basically do is it's a continuum, right? And on one side of the room, it could be like a football field, as much space as you can have. But on one side, all the way over on one side is one particular item. And then on the complete opposite of the spectrum is the other item. And so they're generally things that are at odds with one another. And an example that I would use, and one that's kind of a fun one, is, are you a FOMO person or a JOMO person? And by the way, FOMO is fear of missing out, right? JOMO is joy of missing out. And so no, we're human beings and we're complex. And so a lot of times we're like, well, I'm not all one thing or another. I might be somewhere on that continuum, but it gets fun, especially when you have a group, or just in general, you find out, like, do people race to opposite sides of the room? Are you kind of in the middle, etc.? One time we had somebody that went out the door and down the hall to be like, I'm so far over on this side.
So it's like a personality assessment almost.
It absolutely is. But depending on some of the questions, you can really have a lot of fun with it. So yeah. Where would you fall on the FOMO versus JOMO side of the continuum?
So I have to be in the right mood. I have to be clocking in for my work, you would say. And I guess it's that stage presence thing. And I'm ready to pick up the phone. I'm ready to Slack people. I'm ready to talk all day. But then whenever I'm at home, I want to be at home and I want to be tucked into my little corner and read a book. So I think I would be a ping pong ball. And if you had a clock behind that table, I'd be going in different directions as it was progressing.
Yeah. I will say that with a lot of, and the multidimensional professional that we both are, right? A lot of times I'll say well, which Bridget is answering? You know what I mean? And at which stage of my life, because we show up differently, right? Your work self, your family self, etc. Few of us, I feel like it's rare, having done this game for folks, that people are always all one thing. It really shows your nuance. But then you kind of talk about, well, why does this flavor of me come out in this circumstance or not? I'm similar to you. I would be, for the most part, when I'm on, and especially, for a living, I'm engaging with people. I want to be where the action is happening, right? You need to, but it's also taxing. It's emotionally a lot. And so I absolutely need my rest and recoup time. And that's where I'm like, don't hold up plans for me. By all means, I need to retreat a little bit and, you know, replenish my batteries.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me, and we've traveled together a couple of times, or I've traveled to you, I think, more, but it reminds me of those moments where you've got these 3-day meetings and you're constantly in these intense meetings all day long and conversations, and then it's time to go out for the team dinner. And there's been moments where I've just been like, guys, I can't go. I gotta lay down.
Absolutely. Or we're like, oh no, it's going to be an early night. Looks like we're heading back to the hotel. And I'm like, darn.
Yeah.
And you think like, that's okay. I need it. I love that. I need that balance. If that starts to get out of whack, for me, everything starts to get out of whack. But again, I didn't know this earlier in my career. And that's where like you start to learn about burnout and you start, I mean, literally, I didn't know this about myself until, you know, not terribly long ago.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. So HR, I've said this and many others I think have also, that you're not traditional HR, which I love. So tell me about how you show up versus more of a old school stereotypical HR maybe shows up.
Yeah. I have heard that a lot, to your point. And full love and respect for the craft and for my sort of colleagues. No offense to them whatsoever. I do take it as a bit of a compliment because I know that it's intended as one. And so I try to read like what that really means. I think that they're not doing anything wrong. I think that I like to think that I'm probably maybe getting something right. If stylistically, I would say. My approach personally, I'm more accessible, a little bit more authentic. Doesn't mean they're not authentic, right? But you know, I guess I'm less afraid probably of some of those boundaries. And I think that traditional HR sometimes feels a lot of pressure to be buttoned up and perfect, right? And so like, I don't know, there's the antiquated things that I grew up in the craft learning, which was like, you never apologize, you never show emotion. And like, I don't do that at all. And I tried it for a minute and it just did not work. And so I'm somebody that I'll cry in the moment, right? I'll say this situation absolutely sucks if it does. And I'm not afraid personally, I think, to be very, very real. I do think that, I mean, we've worked together. I can be a little bit, you know, more silly. I can, you know, that can come across maybe as like less feeling the need to always be polished and feeling the need to, more importantly, I think, have all the answers, right? So I'm not afraid to say I don't know. I think that it's not just my career, but I think it's a lot of execs in general, right? There's this immense pressure to feel like you have all the answers, and it's unrealistic. It's a trap, right? Like, I think people are far more likely to engage with us and, you know, give us an element of trust if we're candid. And if we're navigating change, like my style in particular, I will be somebody that will say, I promise you this will be bumpy, right? As opposed to like, no, I promise you this is going to be smooth sailing, etc. And have confidence in my confidence. Have some confidence that I don't have it all figured out. But I promise you, here's how we think about it. Here's what's important to us. Here's the lines that we will never cross. Like, here's our principles. Here's the foundation. And here's how we endeavor to get to the right answer. That's stylistically, you know, as you know, that's kind of my approach.
And I feel like I've witnessed you time and time again, especially with myself. You don't actually establish how you're going to take action until you really unpack the truth behind a situation. You ask so many clarifying questions, you dig deeper, you reword things to ensure that you're understanding situations. You think about the entire scope, from the business needs to survive the business. What does the business need to stay afloat? What needs to happen to make this business decision? Maybe it's an M&A, and how is that going to resonate with the people? How are the people going to feel about this change or this transformation? And the way that, I mean, there are so many different paths here. The way that your brain takes all of that in and you mentioned it, there's not maybe one right, but you have to pick a course and you have to understand what's going to happen with that. Does
Yeah,
that
and
make
I
sense?
think no, it does absolutely. And to the point that you mentioned, like a lot of times I will, basically make somebody kind of exhaust, tell me something and let me make sure I understand it. And I'll ask a ton of questions up front and then I'll read it back to them because if I can't kind of say it in my own words and make sure that, like, do I get it? Then I can't understand that person's perspective. And then think about all then like that's got to be thing one. And then from that, though, one of the things that you mentioned, which I think is really, really key, and again, I think this is a little bit of a trap that we fall into sometimes, which is it's that there is a this versus a that, right? That you can either you can be an advocate for the business or you can be an advocate for your employees, or in the leadership style, well, you're either command and control or you are an advocate for your people, right? That you can't be both, right? Like I'm either a servant leader, all the way this or all the way that, and it's rarely that. Like both of these things can be true at the same time. And I think again, the courage makes it sound far more heroic than it is, but it really is just more. It truly is just saying both of these things can be true at the same time, and we have to navigate that healthy tension in a way that is going to do right by somebody. But first I need to understand what's important to them. So that I think all of that is running through my mind and running through the mind of a good CPO or talent leader when they're dissecting a problem or thinking about an initiative.
Absolutely. Okay, so speaking about some harder conversations or challenges that you've endeavored upon M&A conversations, and you've been on both the buyer and the seller side, from my understanding, right? So throughout those types of conversations and decisions and change management, what is one of the most overlooked human dynamics that could completely derail that integration?
I love the question. What's so funny is that a lot of the times when I'll call it like you touch a hot stove professionally, right? Like, it's all, I've hardly ever, if ever, seen, malice or misintent be the cause of issue. So often, 99.999% of the time, it actually comes from a really, really good space. It actually was very well intentioned. And we just sort of like failed to understand what the impact would be. But on the M&A side in particular, I would say it's for coming from a place of goodness. It's the desire to make it work. You want to make it work so badly that from a cultural and a ways of working standpoint, you underappreciate, right? You say, again, it's human nature. You look at the positive attributes. Look, we've got these two organizations and our values are very similar and we've got the same systems and tools. But what we're not really kicking the tires on as deeply as we could is leadership styles, ways of working, some ways of working and thinking, some of the norms that we have as an organization. And so once you get on the other side of that, a teeny sliver of daylight in that you encountered on the diligence side, I mean, look, oh, this is a little bit different, sort of like from apple to orange, that turns into a giant Grand Canyon of a delta from an integration standpoint. And it doesn't mean don't do it, right? Like that shouldn't be the takeaway from this. It is from a change management standpoint, from an expectation setting standpoint, communication standpoint, that can't be an afterthought, right? You need to walk in there understanding, a good integration strategy is a good diligence strategy. A good diligence strategy is making sure that you're understanding and quantifying. This is a hard dimension to quantify. It's not like other things where you can just say, like, yes, we've checked this box. These things make sense. It's a lot more nuanced. And I do think it takes somebody that knows how to ascertain where there are differences and what those risks could turn into on the other side.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's so, I mean, it's almost like after you go through this change management, you're realizing that the day-to-day operations are not meshing. And maybe you have a leadership team that's blended together that isn't aligned because they're not the founders of the original company, and they're trying to put all their values and all their visions and missions together. And while on paper you have that, it's the daily acts. Am I hearing you?
You are. That's
Okay.
exactly it. And so, and remember too, when you're talking about that level of leadership, then that are the ones that carry, right? Like, you know how they say, people don't leave their jobs, they leave their managers. And that's been a saying that all of us have heard for a long time. I don't agree with that. I think that there are some directional elements where you're like, that person actually carries the most. That person really sets the temperature, right? They're thermostats. They really set the temperature as opposed to just reflect it. And that's really where like change in many ways sort of happens, where change is adopted and where it actually sort of like, where a bill becomes a law. That group, because remember, they may or may not have had choice, or knowledge coming up to that situation. And so this is happening to them. When things happen to you, again, human nature, that can be an area where sometimes resistance comes in, sometimes it's scary. You don't have all the answers, which remember we talked about before, and it's like that can be unnerving to folks. And so you're asking a lot of them. And so I think it is, again, saying we know and anticipate that there will be bumps. I think, and here's how we're going to work through them together. We need to have a really good means of communication. We need to have a really good means of having a pulse where we understand what's working and what isn't. We have to know that, like, it's not going to be so easy as just flipping a switch and then saying it's done. It takes a long time, probably to, like, really get into the muscle memory of that on the other side. And knowing that it's okay to raise your hand and say those things. We will institutionalize a way where communication can be ongoing. We're going to stay close to these things. That's how you support those folks. Without supporting those folks or making them feel as though, well, this should be easy, what's wrong with you if you're struggling with it, that's where I think these things can start to unravel in my experience.
No, that goes such a long way. I mean, honestly, it's teamwork, and it's being vulnerable and having transparency, and I don't know the answer, but we're going to figure this out together type of thing.
Right.
Oh, right. That's so cool. Okay. So somewhat related, when in your career did you realize that leadership is less about policy and more about psychology? Like, how long did it take you to throw the rule book out the window and just have that gut instinct and, honestly, the empathy for people's emotions and well-being as a component of it?
I love that question, and it should be like broadcast everywhere. And what's funny for how I got there, I took an interesting path to get there. So for me, and I'll come full circle, but for me, I originally thought I went the other direction. I almost went from psychology to the operational side, so to speak. And I learned the hard way because that's how I like to learn. I thought my role was to basically like counsel people. I thought that I was going to be there to, we're going back in the day where I thought, okay, well, there's going to be behavioral and performance related things and conduct and management styles, interpersonal conflict. And I was probably a good 10 years in before I realized that sometimes, actually kind of a lot of the times, things were crossing my desk that were like, it was a people issue, but it really was an operational issue in people's clothing, right? And so it would be like, it would come to me as, hey, let's say we have two individuals and, they're not vibing with one another. There's a personality mismatch, or, somebody maybe isn't staying in their swim lane and there's friction there. And the more I started to really kind of diagnose, and you would zoom out and you'd be like, well, hold on, did we as an organization establish what we expected of each person, right? And like, what is the clarity of ownership? Who does have the ball in this particular situation? And maybe we didn't provide it, or more than likely, we thought we provided it, but it wasn't clear, right? Because again, if it was this new, was this a change? Did we reinforce it, right? Like all of the different ways that you could do it. So when I was chasing all the right things from an engagement standpoint, from folks' career equity equation, their value proposition relative to their job. How do we maximize that? Salary and total rewards, recognition programs, all of these ways of slicing and dicing engagement. This foundational aspect for me, which was, first and foremost, it's hierarchy of needs. Just make it easy for me to do my job. And like how often that was the root issue. Like literally just give me clear expectations, take blockers away. And it was like a light bulb went off for me in my professional career at that moment. And that is like, I think bringing it back to your idea about psychology, the psychology of frustration, so to speak, is so incredibly damaging. Yeah. And so sort of like unmooring to people if there's a blocker and if you can't be successful. Because generally, I mean, for the most part, there's some exceptions, but we love our craft. We want to do what we want to do. Do you know what I mean? Like we want to be able to do our best work. For the most part, I think everybody really is motivated in that way. And so when there are blockers there, and they might not even realize, again, it may manifest as this person is in my way. But the reality, again, is they're blocked, they're frustrated. How do we make it easy for them to work?
So in layman's terms, blockers could be anything tactically, like they don't have the right tech stack or they're not utilizing the right tools that they didn't even know were available. Or it could be organizational structure and roles and responsibilities and how they intersect and hand over things for the next step in the processes. Maybe there's no scopes of work even built. It could be anything like that, right?
100%. And the times when, if you're new to an organization or you're meeting people or, you're just engaging with somebody for the first time and going through that, I personally like to take a really holistic view on how are all of these items basically working for us. Like your work experience, we're wrong, I think, to take just one sliver of it and say, right, like, well, what's my comp, right? What are all the things that I could compare in an offer letter to another organization? That's part of it, right? But like, do you love the relationships that you have within your team and or externally with clients, if that's the capacity? Do you, are you learning and growing? Is, work-life blend, appropriate to you? Is it working for your current situation? And then, with how we've enabled you and empowered you, hopefully empowered in your current position, is it easy for you to work or is it hard for you to work? And that's an underappreciated and under-discussed dimension today, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm smiling at the next question.
Oh boy.
When you hear the quote, move fast and break things, how does that make you feel?
Oh boy. Not great. I will say,
or what is the other one? A bulldog and a China shop?
Yeah,
is that the other one?
Yeah. Yes, I've heard those. I think, well, here's what I think. When I hear that, I know the persona that I'm working with, right? And I love hearing it because I know how they're motivated. I know how they think.
Okay.
So, and I can be a bit of a professional chameleon. Again, it doesn't mean that you're not authentic and genuine because you hold your, beliefs very, very, very strongly, and your principles and your values. And I think those follow you wherever you go. That said, when you're in a role that involves a ton of communication, a ton of alignment, and a ton of change management, you have to be able to speak the language of whomever it is that you're dealing with. So when I hear move fast and break things, I'm like, cool, I know how they think. So that helps a lot because I think I agree with them. So this is this versus that. I agree with them in that if something isn't working, we shouldn't be afraid to say that it's not working. And we shouldn't be afraid to be bold. We shouldn't be afraid to embrace change. We shouldn't be afraid to fail fast, right? Try this. If it doesn't work, obviously we move on to the next thing. And we're not beholden to sunk cost or any of the fear-based things that keep people from evolving. So I like that a lot. Where in my experience it has touched a hot stove a little bit is when it runs amok and it gets a little bit deeper, which is, we're going to throw things at the wall, unchecked, that can turn into, we're going to throw things at the wall and we're going to see what sticks. And there are certain things where it's like, well, we need to have a baseline of expectations with regard to like what things can never ever slip.
Mhm.
So on that foundation, you can have a really nice sprinkle of, move fast and break things, but there are some things that we agree can never be broken. And so I
Absolutely.
think, yeah, I think as long as you have that, there can be goodness there. It just needs to be integrated in the right framework.
And the leaders that you work with at that point, knowing them from a psychological standpoint, if they're responsible, if they're typically more conservative in nature with their decision making, so that probably puts you at ease. Motivated, so it might be the reason why they're saying they want to move fast and break things, because they're passionate and they see an opportunity to fix something that's broken. But you
Mm-hmm.
have to decide, what pathway are you moving fast on, and what is it that you're breaking? Because it can't be almost that leader goes and says that as like a theme and a mantra. That can't become a mantra for all of the different roles, right?
Right. That would be really dangerous. Again, it's like if you have no standards on the core things need to be unbreakable, right?
Right.
And I mean, the obvious things, right? Like we're going to operate within, legal parameters and ethical parameters, right? And like here are our commitments that we've made as an organization. Here's our KPIs that we can't do. But outside of that, if we're incubating and we're trying to come up with something new or whatever it is, do you create some safety where you say, as an organization, don't be scared to, come up with a new idea, a new way of doing things, et cetera. It may or may not work, but we're not going to slap your hand if it's the latter. That's where I think that there's quite a bit of goodness. To your point around, like, your audience, the person that you're working with, especially doing a lot of like partnering with executives over my career, there is you suss this out if somebody has that mentality where nothing is sacred again, right? Like, and everything can be broken. There's also a thinking, which I don't see often. I really don't. I think people use that phrase intending the 70% of it, just like people say, done is better than perfect. And it's like, well, right, but that doesn't mean that we don't have quality standards, right? Like, I get the idea. Like, again, we can hold this healthy tension, and we're somewhere on this continuum. It's not all one thing or all something else. But I would say sometimes an offshoot of that, which I don't like hearing at all, is I'm too scrappy to be strategic, right? That's an offshoot of I'm just going to throw whatever at the wall, or it's like I'm just focused on this one thing and I'm less worried about sort of like bigger picture. Those two things are not mutually exclusive.
I'm not sure if this applies here, but I've seen leaders come in and try and build a framework that they've used multiple times in different companies before. And while I believe in frameworks, I believe that frameworks need to be shifted and molded into the company's needs. So an exact framework or blueprint isn't necessarily going to work. And I could see I have seen people try and use frameworks without building them for the company and the roles and the people. And then it kind of just an essence of time.
And I think exactly right. And it goes back to some of the, again, it's just like the integration idea. It's integrating two different organizations. You're integrating like a model on top of an existing way of working. In that way, it's no different. And it really is, I say this with love. Again, I understand it's coming from a place of goodness. It's coming from, I've done this and I know it works. And I'm endeavoring to solve a problem in a wonderful way, and in a helpful way, in earnest. But what ends up happening is I think, with the best of intentions, once again, it's a little bit of hubris, right? It's a little bit of, I know what's best because I've seen it, and we need to work in the model that's most safe and comfortable to me, as opposed to reading the room and understanding, I also need to acclimate to this environment, and together we're going to come to something that is, maybe it's 90% what that prior framework was, but it needs to be feathered into this particular dynamic. And in general, it's a two-way street version of implementing whatever it is that you're doing, and it significantly increases, I think, the likelihood of adoption successfully.
All right. Genius words, Bridget.
They're yours. So
So our next question, I actually want to throw something a little tweak at you on this next question. The
Yeah.
question is, what's one uncomfortable truth most senior leaders need to hear in their careers? But I'd love to throw at you that question and then answer it if somebody was coming straight out of college and into a career, what's a truth that you want them to learn up front? So which one do you want to start with? They might be the same.
I'll go top down and then I'll go top down first, only
Okay.
because that's the world that I live in
Yeah.
more.
Because
But
you
then,
executive coach, right?
yeah, but
Mm-hmm.
it will be very, it will, it, you know, a lot of leadership coaching is like everything I need to know as an executive. I learned in, kindergarten kind of thing.
Kindergarten, you're right.
I'm oversimplifying. I'm grossly oversimplifying. But you get what I'm saying. A thing that people need to hear. I would say anchor to your decisions and your principles and your values. And that sounds like, a cursive quote that somebody could have on their wall. But I mean it in terms of, for executives in particular, is stewards of culture. Be extremely purposeful about who you want to be as an organization, right? And be honest about that. And one step further, be protective of it, right? So like, this is who we are. This is our point of view. And that you can draw a really bright line about, and you can communicate around it and engage around it. And it's not that we should aspire to be, rigid and, not flexible or nimble about things, but it's counterintuitive, I think, to have lines that you draw around certain things, especially, here's our principles, here's our values, here's how we think about situations like these. But I think it's scary because I think a lot of times leaders and executives, like, you kind of get into more and more senior in your career because you say yes to everything, right? And because you're managing up and you're managing down and you're getting buy-in and you're building consensus and you're doing all of these things that are getting people to say yes, 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 I agree, I understand, right, like you're living for yes up until a certain point ultimately within your career. And so I think people get into an executive seat and then naturally you don't want to make a decision that is going to make people unhappy, right? And it can be tempting, I think, to measure success of an initiative or an integration or whatever you name it, whatever it is, especially if you're sometimes delivering hard news or unwelcome news. To think that, like, well, I need to figure out a way to communicate this in a way that everybody's going to understand, that everybody's going to be okay with this. And mathematically, we as human beings are different and we're motivated by different things and we want different things. You and I have had this conversation in the past, right? Like there is no one comm strategy, change strategy, etc., that is going to make everybody happy. If it is, then you have a completely homogenous organization, and that in and of itself, right? Like, it's generally not great. So like, it won't be. And so that can't be the sole measure. Now you should endeavor to do your best, right? Like, in how you treat people, how you communicate, hold yourself up to high standards. But if that's the sole measure through which you assess, did I do this well? You're never going to be satisfied. You'll drive yourself crazy and you'll be a bad, candidly, not a very effective leader to boot. I think you're way better to say, this is what we stand for, and this is how we think, and this is how we approach problems. Now, say that in reverse. What would that mean if, again, you're early in career, and a lot of times you do build and grow, as an example, because you say yes to a lot of things? I think what you're doing is, you have to develop a situational awareness to know, what are the things that I do stand for? What have I seen work? What have I seen not? And then understand that, like, as you're honing that skill, when to candidly shut it off, right? Like, it's not that's not where you get your value. You don't get your value necessarily from alignment or from people pleasing, right? From like not having any boundaries. I do think you need to say, this is what's important to me. And by the way, an employer that supports that is probably going to be the employer of choice for you. So it's like knowing what your values are and aligning that. Like I like to say, we vote with our W-2s. You know how they say you vote with your dollars, with, you know, what you choose to support, with where we choose to work, right? Like with who we choose to align ourselves with. And some of that is like, well, you know, this is the opportunity that's available to me at the moment. That's true. But then you also have like, what about my network, right? Like who am I, you know, again, who am I engaging with professionally and in those circles? That becomes your community. Mm-hmm. And so finding a community that then I think shares a lot of those same values, that's what I would say, because you're going to put yourself in a position to make sure that you're at a place where your values resonate with that of the organization. So you're not just setting that tone, but you're, again, reinforcing it in a way that you're being true to yourself.
I'm going to say something bold here, and I mean this in the nicest way. As a leader of teams in the past, I establish trust with those on my team who can be authentic in saying no or challenging me. Mm-hmm. I find more value from those conversations. I don't expect as a leader that I'm always right, or even maybe the business is doing the right thing. And whether I can agree with the person or not, when they don't just say yes and go do it without any questions, I then sit back and question, is this right? I don't want people to challenge me all the time, of course, but when I can trust that they will is a really big game changer for how I pick people.
Exactly. Especially as they're growing within their career, right? Like, mm-hmm. especially as you're saying, like, I don't just need an executor of a task. There are certain things, and sometimes, you know, like let's say someone's doing an internship or what, I'm trying to think about some of the stuff that I did in my intern days, or, you know, right when I was getting started out, where like it was not necessarily setting the world on fire, but like it needed to be done, right? Like, and I needed to learn, and I needed to do some of those things. And I didn't have as much agency then. Mm-hmm. And then you started to get into where you are expecting more situational judgment. And to your point, I think the slider starts to move where you say, yes, you need to get alignment. And a big part of working with other people, I mean, think about, you know, a collaborative team. Everybody's got their remit, but we need to remember, again, organizationally, what are we all doing together? And so it's like, well, we do need to partner with one another. We do need collaborative relationships. We do need goodwill there. But then, again, to your point, developing leaders that know, right? Like, when do we say this is too much and we have too many things in focus and we're going to sacrifice quality? When do we say, actually, hold on, let's play devil's advocate. Have we thought about the opposite side of this? You need that within an organization, which is why I think you want to develop it as, you know, folks are getting more comfortable with this throughout their careers. When that doesn't happen, what happens is you get to very, very senior within a leadership standpoint and with a lot of influence over an organization. And you now, you know, measure your success on, did I make everybody happy? And that's where, again, it's a mirage. It will never happen. And you'll drive yourself crazy in the process.
We were literally just talking about something extremely similar with Phil Castle in the podcast episode 1 yesterday.
Okay.
It's so ironic and cool because basically, in a nutshell, your personal core values have to be set and you have to be comfortable and aware and kind of like grounded in your own values before you can truly succeed. And the definition of success and you know, the smiles on the faces and the targets being hit are very different. Even like taking it outside of the work, if you're judging your success solely on what you're doing in the corporate world, you're never going to win.
Right, and exactly.
It's similar. There's a path that where what you're saying goes right into that.
I was going to say this dovetail, not knowing that it's like scarily interesting how much those two things sort of are very intertwined,
Yeah.
and it's a continuance of that discussion. It sounds like that you had.
And it's back to psychology. Now his was like tapping really into like faith. But like it's back to the psychology on your standpoint of how people think and how they feel and what's motivating them.
Mm-hmm.
Really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
For sure.
So you may or may not have an answer to this one, and that's okay. But do you have a conversation that you can obviously talk about in your years in the corporate world that you had with an employee or a founder that stayed with you for years, and why?
Yes, but it's a sad one. I don't
Okay.
know if I've told you this one before. I
Oh,
may have. You can tell me if I have.
okay.
Although other folks haven't heard it. So act surprised, I guess, if you
Okay.
haven't heard it. Or if you have. I had a scenario. There was a leader that I was a partner with, and we were really, really tight. And we were a very good team, and I really, really enjoyed and working with, and I respected this person. And I'd been at the organization for quite some time, and I was moving on to a different capacity, different type of company, different space, etc. And it was something that I was excited about, right? Like for my career, it was a really, really great opportunity. And when I let this person know that I was going to be moving on, they reacted. They reacted really strongly, and they said, "I'll never forget." They said, "Well, since we work together, I have no choice but to take this personally. This has to be a reflection on me, and I'm super, extremely disappointed in you." And I mean, I felt not even felt. I mean, it was. I was chastised. I was reprimanded. I felt absolutely ashamed, and I was devastated because, I mean, I well, a when you take on the emotional load of others for a living, and then to hear something like this from somebody that like you really respect and hold in high regard, it was very, very extremely jarring. And I will say that at the time, I didn't know how to react to that. At the time, I didn't know how to say like, well, this is, I didn't know how to react, and I internalized all of it. But I will say that, in years of respect that I had for this person were just decimated.
That's
But it didn't,
heartbreaking.
I know it was really bad, and it didn't have to be that way
Yeah.
at all because, I mean, professional paths cross. It's not that big of a world, right?
Mm-hmm.
We think about people with whom, you've had a good working experience, you have, good roots together, etc. Like we, see one another again in all different permutations all throughout our careers. So it was heartbreaking. And by the way, I don't harbor any ill will towards this person. I've seen other instances where if somebody would be departing, sometimes for me, what it illustrates is, to borrow from Stoicism, ego is the enemy, right?
Mm.
And how what I learned from that, since I mean I never had taken issue with it previously anyway, but I very much now am really open and transparent about, when folks are, if they're contemplating a change, I would never begrudge somebody for doing that, just in general. But a lot of times I think the deal that I will always establish with my teams was like, look, if you end up thinking that, it's time for you to move on, you're looking for something different in your career, you can always talk to me about it. I'd much prefer that you talk to me about it, and let's have an honest conversation. I love those conversations because I can make it into a love it or list it, right? Like what's working for us, if something isn't working for us, can we endeavor to fix it? As opposed to being surprised as an example on the other side of that. And if we can't, if let's just say that, like in this case, I was pursuing something that was different, you couldn't get it at this particular organization, then that's fine. Let's have this conversation out in the open, and we can prep appropriately. We can do right by you appropriately. Neither side is pulling the rug out from one another. It's not a prisoner's, you know what I mean? Like prisoner's dilemma thing where like, I'm not going to tell you because you could proactively, like you can just have that conversation up front. We don't need to add emotional manipulation to what is already a difficult career moment.
And like, there's so many things to this. Thank you for sharing that. I did not know this story, but I kind of needed to hear it because I've been through things, especially in the last year, that have been hard, and the way that they've transpired have been literally heartbreaking. But people are people and have emotions, and we can't control that. But one thing that I'm thinking about specifically is in the marketing world, different companies have different marketing roles, like very different specific roles, or maybe they're smaller teams and kind of more generalized. And the one thing that I've always found as a leader, and you do this because you've done this with me, and I know you do this with your team, you cheer them on to grow. How can I give you the skill set? So what I'm trying to say is, you have the conversation with your team. Why wouldn't you? Where do you want to take your career in marketing, for example? What path? Okay, so if you want to do more like paid ads, we don't have that here, but let's get you in touch with our third party that does it for us and let you manage that relationship. Because I know that this company isn't ready for that now, but to get the skill set so that you evolve in your career and find that role somewhere, and cheer them on to do it.
Well, and by the way, you should do it because it's the right thing to do, right? But you should also, even if you weren't motivated by that, if your motivation was purely, purely self-interest, that is a lifetime, mentee. That is a lifetime connection. That person could be your buyer someday, right? And so, but I also know and understand, and this is like fair is fair is fair. Because I think you've seen, it can be very, I think it can be, help me say this in the right way. I think that leaders take so personally, it's sometimes when somebody is leaving, because they formed such an incredible like friendship bond, etc., that it can feel to them like betrayal. And I really have heard people say before, when they find out that somebody that they really, really care about is leaving, that they say it feels like betrayal. And those feelings are real. Like, it's not, their feelings are real and they're valid if they feel that. I can't, tell them they're not feeling that way. The biggest thing, though, that we need to go one step back. Did you create conditions where this person felt comfortable saying to you, this is or isn't working, and here's what I'm looking for? And so it's like, it kind of had to happen in a little bit of a clandestine way, and you were surprised. And that, that creates conditions favorable for a blow up, and for a bridge burned, and for a relationship that unfortunately, won't carry forward.
Yeah. So you have something up your sleeve that we haven't talked about yet, BRGO Talent. And I'm so excited that you've just jumped into this and started something like this. Tell me about it.
So BRGO Talent is basically the culmination of my career looking at, I've always been in-house, right? So I've grown up and I've been in a myriad of different company, industry, size, shape, stage, etc. And I've always been sort of like in-house FTE, etc. And I started to think for a minute about how, I always saw other folks that, were doing more advisory, consulting, fractional work, etc. And, I would engage with them, right, in my seat, that I would be working with people in this capacity. And I always thought, like, boy, that would be so compelling, but I could never do that. I could never do that. And then all of a sudden, it just starts with a question where you're like, maybe I could do that. And there's something for me about the breadth of impact, right? If you're good at this, and I like to think I am, right? Then don't you want to do it in a way where you can, engage with as many different folks as possible? Now, granted, that looks different, because from a talent advisory consulting, fractional standpoint, sometimes you're going to be engaged in a fractional capacity and you're going to be fully immersed for a period of time with that particular client. But especially from a thought leadership side, and especially from, again, like, engaging with you in this capacity and whatnot, the breadth of impact. I'm at a point in my career where I'm now looking to maximize that impact, and that sort of, BRGO gave me an opportunity to do that.
You have so much passion with what you do, and I think it's really amazing to see someone who has over 25 years of experience still carry that passion and not kind of fizzle out. Even if you've had the moments that you've fizzled a bit, or dare I say burn out a little bit, you still have this passion to build something like this because you still very much care about your craft and how it impacts others.
I I do a lot. And it's a very delicate balance, especially because, I mean, we all are reading the same things basically. And so, there was a lot of, especially since COVID, there was a lot of burnout and people that were, in some cases leaving the talent world. If you are somebody that is, very, high empathy and, really, really in some ways, probably in an unhealthy capacity for
Mhm.
me, carrying some of the burden that folks were going to. So imagine you've got, you do have COVID, you've got, remote work, then RTO, you've got, different ways of working challenges, you've got, when we were, racial and social injustice, you've got the great resignation, you've got now you've got, just on the precipice of so much change from, ways of working, AI, so much uncertainty that we're navigating. It's a delicate balance between saying, I need to be able to put some boundaries up so that I can do this work in a way that doesn't completely burn me out, right? Because I could burn the candle at both ends and in the middle, and I could just decimate the candle if I let myself go unchecked.
Mhm.
But it really is a calling to say, if you can help people navigate change and sometimes introduce some to the choice, to the event that you can, transparency, agency, choice, etc. It makes it easier for people to navigate some of those waters. Don't you kind of have to? Like, that's how I think about it. So again, doing so on a consultancy, fractional advisory capacity, it means that you can then also have a little bit of that flexibility when you know that, like, okay, here's what I can commit, and now I'm gonna be able to take a beat and do some of my own personal things, etc.
Mhm.
But that's how I endeavor to approach the situation. But again, can some of these insights be more broadly communicated? So I'm not just solving this problem down here in this little well that nobody knows about. Can we talk about some of these things more broadly, like the frustration thing? We're not
Mhm.
really talking about that right now, at least not
Mhm.
in the degree that we probably should be.
Yep. I am so excited for your word to continue to get out there and just working with you and witnessing you, both on a personal front now and from the workforce. It's amazing what you do, how you think, I think is absolutely incredible. I still can't quite figure out your brain. And I think that's the best part. Like, you're just very brilliant and intelligent in the way that you go about life and working with people. And so, for those of you listening, just check BRGO Talent out and Bridget out and see what she's got to say. She's got a lot of amazing things to say. And she doesn't just say things either. Today's a big day for you as we record this. And I know you have an amazing skill set in the HR, corporate, and consulting world, but there's something that you do that shines very brightly behind the scenes. Tell
It's
us.
so blush. So Sam knows that I'm a creative as well. And so, in addition to sort of like my professional career, which I'm super, super proud of, I come from a, very, very sort of like talented, creative, passionate family. And we are musicians. I'm a singer-songwriter. We used to have a Beatles band. And now I have just sort of like an indie project called Godzilla. And so I write some songs and I put them out there, and it's really fun. And I built a studio in COVID times. I would go downstairs 5 in the morning and I would just chip away at like my first album, but I really, really enjoyed doing it. And so, it's funny because nobody knew about it for the longest time. You found out about it. I remember literally when the EP came out, but I had done it secretly. Nobody knew. And I was really afraid that if people knew that there was another side of me, that somehow it would be like, oh, well, then she must be less serious or less committed or, whatever it was. And so I sort of was a clandestine secret artist for the longest time. And now that's not it. So I realized that like I looked at what that voice in my head was telling me and I thought like, this is nonsense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, okay, so it's spelled like your name, Gotzilla.
Yeah.
Gotzilla, and you have a single that actually came out today as we're recording. I absolutely love your music. It's fun and it's meaningful, and I just feel like I hear your heart when I listen to it, even on the songs that are maybe more somber or whatever it is. You can just hear your passion in it. But you also do a podcast with your sister, right? And this one, goodness, like I think I texted you or I sent you an audio because I was floored. The marketing that you do and the way that you've branded this podcast, your EPs and your album on Godzilla are the same way, but something so witty with the Jingle All the Way podcast it's just so witty and fun.
I love that you love it, and that is high praise coming from you, especially on the marketing side. High praise, and I can pass my thanks along from Heidi as well, my sister who does this with me. We will take a product, and then each of us will write a jingle for it, and we'll sing it to one another, like just a cappella, sing it to one another. It's totally just off the cuff. And then we spend the remainder of, and then we let our listeners vote on which one they think did the best. And then we spend the remainder of our time kind of making fun of each other and telling stories. So literally we used to have a radio show when we were in college and everybody really liked it. And they were like, oh my gosh, you guys should do it again. And so we were looking for something to do, but I'm like, we can't just do nothing. I'm like, you've got to have something that this anchors around. And then by all means, we can go into a, 20-minute thing about how the Honeycomb Hideout came to be. Do you know what I mean? Like we can do all of the rabbit holes. It's basically jingles and rabbit holes.
It's so nostalgic because like I grew up with the Folgers, the Folgers song and everything. And we don't really watch advertisements much anymore. You can skip over them or they don't have jingles. Like there's not the meaningful marketing behind them that are trying to like pull at the emotional strings of people. And so the fact that you're taking products and building their own jingles, number one, some of these jingles aren't like Folgers or all the things. They're like really fun and witty. You did a spaghetti one, and I can't remember what the spaghetti sauce. What was it? Yes, gorilla. The gorilla.
Yeah, my sister did gorilla, and now that's all anybody thinks. But this is where it feels random to be like, and I'm an indie artist, and I write jingles. Like that's a weird thing, but it is and it isn't because it's earworms. Do you know what I mean? Like I love melodies. I'm a Beatles kid. You know what I mean? Like I love melodies. And so
go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's it.
This podcast is so, I don't know if you did this intentionally, but it's the perfect time. Like it's a good length. So it's a car ride home, giggles, getting like cooling off from a hard day, or maybe you're sitting and waiting to pick up your kids at sports practice. It is the perfect thing. And it's made me laugh out loud every single time. It's just brilliant. So I guess, Bridget, I know we're at time, and it's not been long enough. I
know it's like the sad thing at the end of the thing where it's like, now it's time. Yes.
Like I'm just so impressed by you from a human standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, from a creative standpoint, and I think one thing that this podcast is showing us and the world is that you don't have to just pick one lane to swim in. That humans have so many different dimensions to them. And from an HR leader on top of that is so good to hear.
I love that you say that. I went to do career day at my son's school, and the premise of my presentation was that you don't have to pick just one thing, especially if there are things that light you up. And if you have something where, again, you're a creative, you know this, if you have something where you're turning around an issue in your head, whatever it is, sometimes you need some levity as a counterbalance to that. Sometimes you need just some white space that then, again, I can sit with my guitar or something, and then something's sort of clear, and then inspiration can strike. So the relationship that these things have to one another, and again, I don't know why I spent so many years being afraid of it, as opposed to saying like that actually is your superpower.
Yeah.
but
I'm so glad that you broke out into the world of creativity and let us share your gift, because you are a gift, and I am personally so grateful for you. Um, any last words that you want your followers to hear from you before we leave today?
the gratitude is all mine. I love, 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 the opportunity to conversation with you and chat about this topic. I love these wonderful, thoughtful questions. I'm actually so invigorated now based on some of these thoughts that we've mentioned. So thank you for the inspiration and for the opportunity.
Yes. Well, you'll have to come back on season 3. Thank you again, Bridget.
Deal.